And the subject of the room, please welcome Mr. Mark Purver.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I'm very honoured to be the first of, I hope, many Bright Club speakers. And I must say, this is nothing like speaking at a normal astronomy conference, because we're all a lot better dressed for a start, and a lot more enthusiastic. So without further ado, I'm going to remove the high-tech piece of cardboard. I'm trying to tell you about how to grow a pulsar. Now, we live in a big universe, billions of galaxies, but we only need one for this. Each galaxy's got billions of stars put together. We only need one star. And that star is going to turn into a pulsar. Before we can grow the star, we need a big cloud of dust. And by big, remote control, put this with us. By big, I mean much, 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 much bigger than the volcanic ash cloud that came out of Iceland. 10 to the 20, that's 1 followed by 20 zeros, times bigger than that cloud is what we need to make the sort of star that's going to turn into a pulsar. That's 100 billion billion. And frankly, a lot of the numbers that I've talked about are a bit silly in any units. So try to get creative with those units. So we start off with a big cloud of gas, and all it's really got going for it is the force of gravity, which is pulling the whole thing in towards its center. It's going to get hotter and hotter. If it's spinning a little bit, it's going to start spinning more and more like an ice skater as they tuck their arms in and start spinning faster. And right in the center, it's going to get very, very, very dense indeed. And the atoms there are going to start fusing together. And that process is nuclear fusion. And that's what gives out so much light and heat that then turns the thing into a star. And the star is going to be something like 10 times the mass of our own sun. So it's going to be very big. And this kind of illustrates a bit of a problem we have in astronomy, which is that we can't really go to or touch or manipulate the experiments that we're looking at. If this thing is bigger even than the sun, we haven't really got to hope of growing a pulsar ourselves. We've just got to let nature do it for us. That's led some people to say that astronomy isn't really a science because you can't manipulate the experiment. It's a bit unfair because we do take data, make measurements, and obviously use the stars to make predictions. Not these kind of predictions, actually. So back to the big dust cloud. Now, I already explained that as it gets incredibly dense, it's going to start fusion right in the center of it, and that's going to give out a huge amount of light and heat, which makes it into a star. And the sort of star that's going to turn into a pulsar is bigger than our sun, it's hotter, and it's bluer. If you put the Earth next to it, I guess you can just about see right there. Well, you wouldn't really want the Earth to be anywhere near it. And this star doesn't collapse anymore because of the enormous amount of heat that's coming out of it now due to the fusion in the center. That's all that keeps it going. It stops collapsing and it becomes stable, and it gets to live as a big blue star for about 10 or 20 billion years, which sounds like a long time. But in star terms, this is living fast and dying young. And at the end of that time, all the hydrogen, all the gas in the middle of it is going to be used up. But gravity, of course, never gets used up. And so as the heat eventually stops coming out, the thing collapses further. And it makes larger and heavier elements. And they, in turn, fuse. But they run out of energy much more quickly than the original gas. And eventually, you end up with a core that's made of iron. And at this point, you can't get any more energy out of fusion. And the star is doomed, and it keeps just collapsing down more and more. And it's right in the center of there that the pulsar is going to be created. And to explain what sort of produces the pulsar, I'm going to go from this very, very, very large thing to a very small thing. This is an atom, and all of the material in the center of the star is obviously made of these atoms. In the center, there are protons and neutrons. Should we point at this screen? Get a quick summary again. There's the big star. I pressed the wrong button. So you've got a load of protons and neutrons in the middle. There they are. And orbiting around the edge, you've got electrons. But, as I said, it's getting so incredibly dense now, in the centre of this doom star, that a rather odd thing happens, which is the protons and the electrons actually merge together, and they make more neutrons. And in the end, all you've really got in the middle of this star is a huge load of neutrons. And it's this neutron star that's going to be the pulsar. It's incredibly dense. There's a few protons and electrons still hanging about the edge. Basically, it's just a big ball of neutrons. And this is where it gets difficult to explain, because it's such an extreme thing. I'm going to try and explain what a pulsar is like. You can close your eyes if you want and imagine this. It's got the mass of the sun, or a little bit more, but it's only the size of a city. So it's a huge amount of matter all crammed down into this tiny little, tight ball of neutrons. It's incredibly rigid, just can't get any smaller without becoming a black hole. And as the rest of the star collapses around it, it in the end hits this core of neutrons and just bounces off and flies out in the huge explosion, which we know is a supernova, which can outshine the whole galaxy, at least for a few days. And then you end up with a rather beautiful thing like this. This is the Crab Nebula. It's a leftover remnant of a supernova. It was seen going off about 1,000 years ago, and this is what it's turned into. So all of that is exploded star, and somewhere in the middle of it remains the little core that is the pulsar. So right in there, although you can't even see it, the mass of a whole sun concentrated into the size of a city. It's got an incredibly strong magnetic field, so it's just like a magnet with a north and a south pole. And it's spinning incredibly fast, maybe 100 times a second, because it's got so compact. So if you can imagine something that size spinning that quickly, that sort of magnetic field, it's tearing electrons and things off the surface. There's constant sort of electrical storms. There's two great beams of radiation coming out of the magnetic poles of this thing as it spins. And so when we look at pulsar, what we see is something like this. It's perhaps not as impressive as you were hoping for. But that's because it's really just a glimpse of something that's quite far away and rather weak. So we can glean a lot of information just from something that doesn't look like much. This is actually the pulsar that is in the Crab Nebula. And those beams of, Rick's just giving me my 2-minute warning there, those beams of radiation are flashing past the Earth, and they're giving us this lighthouse-like signal. And actually here you can see a bright pulse come on, and then a little dimmer one, and that's because in this case, both of the beams of radiation are sweeping past us. We see something like that. So now if we go back to look at the nebula, we can see it quite literally in a new light, because we know that inside this, the pulsar